Bright weather with some sunshine, a touch milder than today, still below average, still feeling pretty chilly, but the winds perhaps not quite as strong as they have been today either. We'll see a bit more wet weather coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland during the evening. That'll have some snow over the hills, and we'll still have some snow mixed in as it heads southwards across Wales during the early hours of Saturday morning. That'll bring a showery start to the weekend across South Wales, southwest England, with some snow over the mountains and the moors. Still one or two scattered showers across the east, but otherwise a lot of dry, bright weather across the country this weekend. It's going to stay on the chilly side. Yes, there will still be a few showers here and there, but many places will see some sunny spells. But do watch out for some icy conditions overnight tonight.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It has just gone 4 o'clock. Hi there, welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news for you from 4 until 6 today. Coming up on the show, house prices jumping faster than at any time in the last 18 years. When will rising mortgage rates and inflation eventually prick the property market bubble? Or maybe they won't. Also, as a film released by a Disney insider suggests the indoctrination of children is fair game, I'll ask, how do we stop our kids from going woke? And Die Hard, Pulp Fiction or Armageddon as Bruce Willis announces his retirement from acting, we rate his greatest films. Alongside me today, the barrister Francis Hoare, but first we have the headlines with Polly.
I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom, and the top stories today. The UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russian interests, with the broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. It comes after the Ukraine's president called for tougher sanctions against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky received a standing ovation as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments. And he asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership for his country. He also told parliamentarians Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world.
Whatever is happening in our region because of the Russian aggression, what is destroying the lives of people, has become a real threat to your country and to your people as well, because this is the nature of the evil. It can instantly cross any distance. Russian representatives, officials, official propagandists, they are openly discussing the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who don't want to subdue.
Volodymyr Zelensky there. Well, Ukraine says many of the Russian forces who had been occupying the Chernobyl nuclear plant have now left. The state nuclear firm said Russian troops had headed for the Belarusian border, leaving just a few behind. The firm also said Russian forces had retreated from a nearby town where Ukrainians who work at the Chernobyl plant live. But speaking in Brussels, the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said there's no evidence Russia is scaling back.
According to our intelligence, Russian units are not withdrawing, but repositioning. Russia is trying to regroup, resupply, and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region. So we can expect additional offensive actions, bringing even more suffering.
Jens Stoltenberg. In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are simply scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president had massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people and that he had overestimated the capabilities of his military forces to secure victory.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisers are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
Sir Jeremy Fleming. Well, President Vladimir Putin has signed a decree which demands foreign buyers of Russian gas must pay in rubles, and there's a deadline tomorrow. He's warned that contracts will be halted if payments aren't made, but Western countries have rejected the move as a breach of existing contracts, which are set out in euros and in dollars. Freelance Germany correspondent Thomas Sparrow told GB News the German Vice-Chancellor has activated emergency plans if Russia stops supplying gas.
There will be a crisis group meeting on a daily basis in his ministry, trying to evaluate the situation, trying to help businesses prepare and try to make sure that if that does happen, if Russia does stop delivering gas, that Russian businesses and that German businesses and German households are also prepared.
Well, here, a deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas wells have been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The company welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down wells during an energy crisis. Labour has been launching its local election campaign in Bury, in Greater Manchester, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600 per household. The party's warning that households can be expected to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living crisis. Speaking to a question about Partygate, however, Sir Keir said the Prime Minister's wife should be named if she's fined, but ultimately the buck stops with the Prime Minister.
If Carrie Johnson gets a fixed penalty notice, of course it should be made public. My focus is on the Prime Minister because he's the one who sets the culture. He's the one who oversaw this criminality in his home and his office. He's the one that came to Parliament and said that all rules were complied with, which is clearly not the case.
Sir Keir Starmer. The Royal Mail is modernising. It's phasing out traditional first and second class stamps and replacing them with newer barcode labels. It's all part of a modernisation drive said to add security features. Customers will be able to interact online by scanning the new barcodes in the Royal Mail app. Normal stamps will be valid until February next year, after which customers can swap them for the new versions. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now let's get more from Brazier.
7 minutes past 4. Thanks for watching. Coming up, the latest from Los Angeles as the organisers of the Oscars say they are taking disciplinary action against the actor Will Smith. But first, one of Britain's most senior intelligence experts says Vladimir Putin is not being told the truth by his generals. These are the words of Sir Jeremy Fleming, the boss of GCHQ, the UK's eavesdropping agency. And he's claimed, Sir Jeremy's claimed, that Putin's top brass are not giving their boss an accurate picture of just how badly things are going on the various fronts on the battlefield. Well, let's ponder that thought. Joining me now, the former Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko. Petro Poroshenko, thanks very much indeed for your time. We have a view of the battlefield from some distance away. You've got a much closer view. How is the war going for Ukraine?
We are in the center of the battle, and today is the 36th day of Russian aggression. 5.5 weeks. The time when Putin expected to rise up the Russian flag above Kiev within 36 hours. We have 36 days. And Ukraine demonstrates a unique ability and opportunity to save the world. And paying for that, thousands of the lives of civilians and thousands lives of Ukrainian hero Ukrainian soldiers. Putin, when we stop Russian troops on the distance about maybe 10, 15 kilometers from this point, all Kiev are the zone of front. And can you imagine that Putin already lost a third of Russian contingent? More than 17,500 Russian soldiers killed here and stay here forever because they come to kill Ukraine. More than 40,000 Russian are injured. And again, 266 jet fighters and helicopters, and more than 3,000 tanks and the armed personnel carrier. This is what Ukraine saved Europe. This is how Ukraine saved the world. And we are here in your broadcasting, you speak about the de-escalation of Russian troops. Please, this is not true. The de-escalation a la Putin, this is just words without deeds. And we exactly at the moment when Putin declared about the softening the Russian troops around Kiev, we have shelling, artillery shelling, multi-rocket launch shelling, and just besides me, we have a residential building which was attacked by cruise missiles of Russia. They attack us permanently. The last cruise missiles was happening just 50 minutes ago, right in the center, right in the downtown of Kiev. And we are witness now the retreat of some Russian forces on the north of Kiev, but your intelligence and NATO General Secretary is absolutely right. This is just a regrouping. Putin do not stop. Putin declared to the Italian Prime Minister that this is not a time for ceasefire. And I know what does it mean, because as a founder of the new Ukrainian states and new Ukrainian army, together with Ukrainian people and Ukrainian volunteers, I know what does it mean. And I'm proud that together with our partners in NATO, we create the new armed forces. And this is what I told them. We have a lot of to learn from the NATO forces, including with our British partners, but we have a lot of British partners and NATO soldiers to learn from Ukraine how to beat Russia. And we just deliver the evidence of that. But the tragedy of Ukraine, tragedy of Mariupol, tragedy of Kiev suburb, including Irpin, Gostomel, Bucha, Vorzel, is just demonstrating that Putin is worse than Nazi criminals. And the attack which we have here in Kiev and in Ukraine, it is sometimes worse than in World War II.
Mr. Poroshenko, we can see the building behind you that you're describing, and it just typifies the sorts of damage we've seen at various locations across Ukraine. It's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars to rebuild the cities of Ukraine. And even assuming that rebuilding work can begin, I wonder how many of the millions of people, the millions of Ukrainians who fled for their lives to other European countries, some of them to the UK, will eventually return home, or whether in fact some of these communities, villages and towns will remain empty and emptied for years to come.
First of all, when you said millions, we have a last calculation of the Ukrainian government, and they told about $1 trillion. Can you imagine? $1 trillion. This is how Putin want to erase the whole state. And this is very difficult to find out a compromise with Putin, because he want to have us killed. He want to take our lives from us. And he want to destroy Ukrainian state. And we just want to live. And the only scene we have, this is just we want to be free and we want to be democratic. And definitely this is the point which we want to discuss, but we never give up. And we will never get surrendered. And imagine that the victory of free world now is depend, can you imagine, from maybe 100 tanks, 500 armed personnel carrier, and 90 jet fighters. And that help us, Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian citizens, which we are on the front of the war, just to throw Putin back to the Russia. And that's why it's so important to renew the arms supply. Again, this is anti-tank, anti-aircraft, but tank, armed personnel carrier, jet fighters, bomber, offensive weapons who can help us to keep Putin back. And please give us the tools to do our job. Let us or help us to save you. This is the absolutely clear message for our British partners. And you are right that more than 30% of Ukrainians are displaced persons. More than 4.5 million Ukrainian ladies, women, and children, most of them are abroad. And more than 6.5 million internally displaced persons moved to the Western Ukraine. And definitely this is the suffer a lot of Ukrainian people, but the people, the men are on the front, and most of them are in the long line to be enlisted in Ukrainian army. And what we waiting also, except of the weapons from you, our dear friends, sanction and embargo. Sanction, which make harder and harder for Putin to continue the war. An embargo who bring to stop financing Putin, who is paying for Russian tanks, Russian missiles, Russian cruise missiles, which killing Ukrainians. And I very much appreciated the initiative of the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the leadership which demonstrate the United States President Joe Biden, and the unity which demonstrate European Union. And this is definitely which Putin do not expect. Same way that he do not expect situation.
Petro Poroshenko, we have to leave it there, but we very much appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
That's the former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. Alongside me here in the studio, Francis Hall, listening to that interview. And I wonder if, struck as I was, Francis, by the fact that he's lauding Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, actually, but both politicians, especially Joe Biden, who, when push came to shove, Petro Poroshenko, desperate to see a no-fly zone in the skies above Ukraine, but actually Joe Biden has said, no, that's not something we can contemplate, lest we start a chain reaction that leads to World War III.
Well, a no-fly zone means that you shoot down planes in the Russian Air Force, and that is pretty inconceivable with a nuclear power, probably. But the other, I mean, that was an extreme honour to have the former president on the show and visually demonstrating the real problem. I mean, his mention of $1 trillion doesn't surprise me. It's an astonishingly terrible destruction the eastern Ukraine that's happening.
He didn't really address that question. He can't, I suppose. But this is a big country, 44 million people, huge landmass. And I just wonder how many of the literally millions of Ukrainians who've left for Germany, other countries, will actually ultimately go back. I mean, obviously, in many instances, it's women and children who've left. So that sense of starting a new life might not be as attractive as it might have been if their menfolk had gone with them. They've stayed to fight.
Yes, and if circumstances change and Ukraine regains a lot of its territory, then one would expect that they would want to return. And this is very different to the usual type of refugees that we see. On the whole, in the early 21st century, this is a proper huge war that they're fleeing. I mean, obviously that does happen in certain parts of the world, but on the whole, it's not as extreme as that. So you would expect a greater return.
Francis, for now, thanks very much indeed. We're going to change tack and we're going to tell you about a story that was just breaking actually about this time yesterday. And it's a story that's got a lot of people interested and pondering on what it is to be a celebrity when it's time to leave the stage, metaphorically, if not literally. Bruce Willis, retiring from acting at the age of 67. In a statement, the star of Die Hard said he was suffering from a degenerative cognitive illness. It's called aphasia. It's often caused by a stroke, a severe head injury, or a brain tumour. It can also be an early sign of dementia. It causes difficulties, we're told, with language or speech. Well, let's turn to somebody who can explain what it does mean for people who've got it. James Major, Chief Executive Officer of the Speak With It aphasia charity. Welcome to you, James Major. It's always a difficult one for charities and campaign groups, isn't it? Somebody, a high-profile figure says, this is now my problem, and actually people then tune in and realise this is a more widespread problem than they gave it credit to.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I had a look just preparing for this earlier today. There was a survey done a few years ago in the US that discovered that there was only 84.5% of people that actually knew what aphasia means. And that's despite there being, I mean, in the UK, there's approximately 360,000 people with aphasia. You were right when you said it affects a person's ability to communicate. So it can affect their speaking, their reading, writing, understanding. It also, really impacts on a person's well-being, and can lead to social isolation, the kind of dismantling of a person's social networks because their confidence can be, really affected by the condition.
And I was reading an interview today with somebody who was the sort of body double for Bruce Willis. And James, it was obvious from what he was seeing, just up close to Bruce Willis, that there were early signs that all wasn't well there. At the end of the day, we are talking about somebody whose career is in the communications industry. They've got to memorise lines, all the rest of it. It would have been pretty apparent that there was a problem fairly early, one imagines.
Possibly. I mean, stroke, aphasia can come as a result of stroke or a traumatic head injury. It could be a brain tumour. It could be a part of dementia. There tends to be a kind of a traumatic incident that happens, and then a person is diagnosed with aphasia. So I don't know if it's something that can develop over time. I did see that interview in the newspaper, and as I say, we don't know what the incident was. We don't know if he's had a stroke. We don't know if it's dementia. There hasn't been much information come out, has there really? But we find that there's an incident that happens, a stroke or a head injury or a brain tumour, and then the person will be diagnosed with aphasia.
Yeah.
And as I said, that affects a person's ability to communicate to varying degrees. So it's not just speaking, it's reading, it's understanding spoken language, understanding written language as well.
James Major, really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it. Francis Hawks alongside me. Just a very brief thought. James was making the point there that we don't know all the details, and obviously this is medically confidential. The family have released a statement. But actually, if you're a campaigner like James, it would be really useful, wouldn't it, if the family had said, look, this is actually aphasia that's been caused by ...
Well, perhaps they will, but as you say,
perhaps they will.
Privacy is important.
We'll watch this space, won't we? It's snowing in London, and of course it's been snowing for 24 hours and more in parts of the UK, but there are people I work with who suddenly feel it's a story. We're going to bring you the weather forecast now.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. There's a small chance of seeing the aurora tonight across parts of northern Britain. A greater chance, though, of seeing a frost. It's going to be a cold one right across the land. High pressure is dominating, but the winds are coming around that high down from the north. That's why it was so chilly out there today. Still a brisk wind blowing across eastern parts in particular, and still plenty of showers coming in from the east as well. So it could well turn icy overnight where we have these showers, which will be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and some snow in places for eastern Scotland, northeast England and at times for East Anglia and parts of Kent also. For the west, many places just dry and clear. Temperatures, though, will be dropping down close to freezing, certainly well below in rural spots. Wales, Northern Ireland, maybe down to -4, -5. Where there's snow lying on the ground, maybe as low as -7 or 8 across Scotland. So a frosty start. We will see more wet weather coming into the northwest, bringing some snow to the hills. Still some showers across the east, so certainly could be icy for the morning rush hour. Temperatures will tick up through the day, though, and we'll keep some showers coming into northeastern parts of England and East Kent. But otherwise, a lot of dry, bright weather with some sunshine. A touch milder than today, still below average, still feeling pretty chilly, but the winds perhaps not quite as strong as they have been today either. We'll see a bit more wet weather coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland during the evening. That'll have some snow over the hills, and we'll still have some snow mixed in as it heads southwards across Wales during the early hours of Saturday morning. That'll bring a showery start to the weekend across South Wales, southwest England, with some snow over the mountains and the moors. Still 1 or 2 scattered showers across the east, but otherwise a lot of dry, bright weather across the country this weekend. It's going to stay on the chilly side, yes. There will still be a few showers here and there, but many places will see some sunny spells. But do watch out for some icy conditions overnight tonight.
Tonight on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, a late intervention from the organisation which governs world cycling has stopped the transgender rider Emily Bridges from competing in the female category of the National Omnium Championships on Saturday. Bridges, who's 21, only began hormone therapy last year after successfully competing as a man who went by the name of Zach Bridges. Well, Bridges had been due to compete against women for the first time in the Derby Velodrome this coming weekend, against a field including Laura Kenny, the 5 times Olympic champion. I talked to Sharon Davis, the former Olympic swimmer, a couple of days ago. She had some very strong opinions on this subject, then were picked up by the newspapers. Let's pursue it some more. Joining me now, Mara Yamauchi, the long-distance runner. She holds, coincidentally, the 3rd fastest time by a British woman in a marathon, just behind the former world record holder, Paula Radcliffe. Mara, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. It does seem that the crunch point that's coming in the Emily Bridges case has been warded off, at least from this weekend. The governing body that governs world cycling has said not this weekend, but they're yet to offer a definitive judgment. What should they say to Emily Bridges?
Well, we understand that the UCI ruled that on a technicality to do with her licence, she is unable to race this Saturday. So the substantive issue has not gone away, which is that Emily is male, born male, will remain male because you cannot change your sex. And if she competes at any point in the female category, to my mind, that is wrong and unfair because males should not compete in the female category. The science is very clear that once males have been through puberty, testosterone suppression, which is used as the kind of fix with this issue, does not remove male advantage. So males who have undergone testosterone suppression, which is one of the UCI rules, retain male advantages, and therefore female athletes do not have fair competition in their own category.
And that, as you say, that advantage that's retained, whether it's in bone density or muscle mass, and you would think in something like cycling, where it's, the long levers really matter, the advantage is going to be even more pronounced.
Yes, I mean, for example, the Q angle, which is the angle that your femur runs from your hip to your knee, that is greater in females because we bear children. That makes for less efficient cycling, running, and other activities. And this is one of the things which never, ever changes, skeleton shape. This does not change, whatever treatment or surgery you have. Some aspects change, like hemoglobin, for example, reduces down to female levels. But many aspects of sporting activity, such as bone density, muscle mass, they do not change at all, or they change minimally. And the science is very clear on this. So to have fair competition in the female category, you cannot have people who are male, full stop.
Mario Mauchi, I just wonder whether the wind is changing a little bit on this and whether perhaps thoughts are crystallising based on the evidence you described there. Some of the female cyclists who've talked about this have been pretty outspoken, and certainly if you think about the Leah Thomas case, forget the words, look at the picture of Leah Thomas on the podium. Actually, we've just thrown one up, but it's not the picture I've got in mind, but many of our viewers, and apologies to our listeners, will know the picture I'm talking about, of Leah Thomas, who has transitioned, wants to be taken seriously as a female swimmer now, but on the podium, having won by a country mile, but the other biologically female swimmers crowded at the other end of the podium and making a point so doing.
Yeah, I mean, you said the cyclists have spoken out, the female cyclists. To my knowledge, they haven't, because they're too scared to. Sharon Davis has been in touch with them, and as I understand it, they are too scared to speak up. And I'm not surprised, because British Cycling have a policy which says, you must accept people in the gender in which they present. You cannot challenge this. And the University of Pennsylvania female swimmers who were up against Leah Thomas were silenced by the officials and coaches of their university and threatened with no jobs or whatever if they spoke up. In athletics, thankfully, in the last 48 hours or so, many more athletes, including currently competing ones, have been speaking up. And I'm so grateful to them and really pleased to see that. It's easy for people like myself, Sharon Davis, Daley Thompson, we're all older, we're retired, but the younger competing ones, they have a lot to lose in terms of sponsorship contracts, fear about not being selected if they speak their minds. So I'm so grateful to them for speaking up, and I encourage other athletes who perhaps are too afraid to speak to really speak up now. There is strength in numbers. We can't all be cancelled. And this is the truth. This is science and the truth.
Mara Yamauchi, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Francis Hall, the barrister, is alongside me. I mean, I don't know to what extent we can take this into legal territory, but Mara makes a good point there that if you are a young athlete, whatever the discipline is, yes, on the one hand, you may be concerned about the fact that somebody who's got a huge physical advantage that puts you in the shade and maybe knocks you down a couple of podium positions, but you're still earning a living, deriving an income from your chosen sport, perhaps. Whereas if you put your head above the parapet, the whole thing might be pulled from under your feet.
Yes, so Mara encapsulates two issues here. There's the obvious issue about biological advantage, and the reason the female category exists is because if you had an open to all category, men would win consistently in almost everything. In fact, talking about puberty, there was a chart going when the world record of a woman's world record is beaten by a boy, it starts at 14 and rarely goes above 15. Wow. So that just encapsulates what a disadvantage women will be if they are faced with a trans ex-male athlete. So that's one issue. But the other issue is, as she said, the cancel culture. Now, one understands that if you're an athlete and you're in a team, there might be restrictions on speech and you might have to accept that. But we're not actually talking about teams. We're talking about the body that supposedly represents athletes in an extremely important issue about protecting the right of women, biological women, to compete against each other and protect the female category and fairness, being silenced. And that's totally unacceptable.
Francis Hall for now, thanks very much indeed. Well, it's now emerged that Will Smith was asked to leave the Oscars ceremony, we're talking about that again, after slapping Chris Rock, but the actor refused. Our debate that's coming up, should he be sanctioned by the Academy for his actions? But first, we've got the latest news headlines with Polly.
Thanks, Colin. It's 16:34 and here are your latest news headlines. The UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russia, with the broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. It comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher action against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky receiving a standing ovation as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments, and he asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership for his country. He also told them Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world. And in a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are just scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people. And Ukraine says many of the Russian forces occupying the Chernobyl nuclear plant have left and are heading towards the Belarusian border, leaving just a few on the ground of the exclusion zone behind them. It also says Russian troops have retreated from a nearby town where Ukrainians who worked at the plant lived. A deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas well has been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The company has welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down the wells during an energy crisis. And Labour has launched its local election campaign in Greater Manchester, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600. The party warns households can be expected to pay more than £2,500 more due to the cost of living crisis. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you are with GB News. More from Brazier after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News
Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, now, the organisation which puts on the Oscars has started disciplinary proceedings against Will Smith. It follows the ceremony earlier this week in which millions of people saw the American actor strike the comedian Chris Rock, who had told a joke Smith took exception to. The Academy of Motion Picture and Arts and Sciences also said Will Smith had been asked to leave the ceremony but had refused. Meanwhile, Chris Rock has spoken publicly for the first time about the infamous slap. He said he was, quote, still processing what happened. So should Smith be punished by the Oscars? Has he crossed a line? Or having apologised, should that be where the matter rests? Now, well, joining us for this debate here in the studio, the barrister, Francis Hoare, and also the showbiz reporter, Christabel Milbank. And we'll start with Christabel. I think you could take the view, Christabel, that actually he's been punished enough already.
Indeed, I think sanctions from the Academy would be just unnecessary. He's already being crucified in the court of public opinion. And this was a mistake that he made, a rather human error that I think everyone can sympathise when, you know, if your mother, father, wife or brother and sister is insulted about something that they can't control, people act rashly, and that's a human error and a mistake on his part.
Francis, what say you?
I understand that, and for what it's worth, if I were deciding whether to prosecute him for a criminal offence, I would suggest that although it would appear on the face of it that an offence was committed, it would not be in the public interest to prosecute him. But he is an actor, a very successful and rich actor, a very influential actor, and he committed, as I say, on the face of it, an assault against another individual who was giving out a prize. And it's simply not good enough to say that the court of public opinion and the punishment that he gets from that is sufficient, because that would mean that nobody was punished for anything if the court of public opinion was against them. So obviously it's not right to comment on what sanction, if any, he should have, but it's entirely right in my view that the Academy does consider sanctions, and he will obviously have an opportunity to address it and consider and make his submissions about what that sanction should be.
Yeah, I mean, Christabel, you admit, I'm guessing you would accept there has to be a disciplinary process. There's got to be a process, and we're not prejudging what that process is likely to be, though obviously the evidence is there. It was shared with literally tens of millions of people. But if they don't take disciplinary action against him, and I'm saying more for the fact he refused to leave when the hosts, the organisers, said, actually, chum, you need to leave now, and he refused to. And if they don't take action, then it's to condone his misbehaviour.
Sure, I understand that, but this is, you know, the moment of his career, you know, the pinnacle of everything he's worked for, and we all know and love him as someone who's been a great role model in the community, and to have his wife being cruelly attacked like that on what is, you know, a high-octane night, I think, you know, it seems unfair that he should have, for example, if sanctions were to include, it's unfair that his work should be diminished in this way. Of course, yes, there has to be due process, but I think really a lot of it's rather unnecessary.
Christopher, I just wonder whether there's an element of this where the people who organise the Oscars perhaps are a little bit embarrassed, as much as anything else, about the reaction of the rest of the audience, because it was one thing for the slap to be delivered, and you've advanced an argument as to why it was necessary. It's another thing then for the entire audience, pretty much, 20 minutes later, to stand unanimously and cheer him to the rafters when he walked off with the Oscars. And there was nary a dissenting voice in the House, which is, I think, pretty hard to believe.
I don't at all, because quite frankly, his work stands for itself, and it was a mistake. You've got to understand that Will Smith was reacting, reacting to something that was very difficult to him, whereas Chris Rock's comments, his cruel joke, that was premeditated, that was scripted, that was intended to hurt. So I think everyone could sympathise with the way he acted. It was a human reaction.
Francis, saw a couple of days ago, sitting where you are now, I had a stand-up comedian who said, this sort of thing can't be tolerated because increasingly he, as a stand-up comedian, comes across situations where he tells a joke that people don't like. He offers it up in a spirit of trying to get a laugh, but also of free speech. And people want to clout him. If we let this go by the board, we run the risk of normalising violence meted out to people who say things other people don't like. We can't have that in a free society.
Well, that's right. I mean, that isn't to say, that is nothing I said should be interpreted as defending what Chris Rock said. And there's a difference between free speech and responsible and pleasant and courteous speech. And this was an unpleasant, it was a joke on an individual who was in the audience. So I quite understand that point. But again, he is in the public domain. If this was in a kitchen, then this would go no further. But the point is, this was being watched by tens and hundreds, perhaps, of millions of people around the world. And as you say, there's a real point for those who perform on stage. If it's seen as acceptable for Will Smith to do this, even under great provocation, then who else is going to do it? And provocation, incidentally...
We've also got to remember that Jada Pinkett Smith is also a public figure, and she did come out on social media rather bravely to discuss her struggles with alopecia. And why was this? So that people did not question or speculate or indeed make jokes at her expense.
Look, I'm not saying... Sorry, I'm only talking about Will Smith here. Should Chris Rock be penalised? Well, quite possibly. And should other people be praised for speaking about alopecia? Of course they should be. But again, you have to take individual responsibility is important. This is a man at the pinnacle of his career, as you said, and as a result has a responsibility to show some example. And also, he's a very privileged member of the Academy, and he does this in the public eye in that way. It's difficult to see why he shouldn't have proceedings against him. And of course, proportionately, that's very important, a proportionate sanction might be given. That's a matter for the Academy.
Well, proceedings, maybe legal proceedings, if Chris Rock were to press charges, there's an act of violence that everyone saw. But in terms of the Academy, in terms of the film industry and the work, I don't see why that should be, diminished with sanctions. The Academy, that's not really their jurisdiction, really, is it?
Christopher Milbank, I mean, you're a showbiz reporter. I mean, we're talking here, I'm trying to just point us back to where we started and about the element of cancellation here, which may or may not happen. As you say, he's got this great body of work. Nobody can take that away from him. Do you think there will be a diminished appetite in Hollywood and elsewhere to commission films involving Will Smith?
Perhaps, but we've seen in showbiz, members in the public eye coming back from the most extraordinary circumstances. Kate Moss's cocaine scandal springs to mind. Suddenly, all of the fashion industry were jumping after a certain amount of time to book her. This is a moment of human error, and everybody kind of, it's a vulnerability that unfortunately was exposed to the masses. But we can all sympathise with, why that happened. And perhaps it will take some time, but I believe that he will continue to be very successful.
Francis, a final point. It's a rather boring one. I make no apologies for that, but I love process. It's really boring. I love process. It takes the heat out of things. It takes the emotion out of things. Here you've got a case, and I know a lot of our viewers will say, it was a slap. Get over it. It doesn't matter. I take the view it does matter, and the process that resolves what we do about it also matters. By the way, we are talking about a country that's 5,000 miles away. I accept that. But I suspect what will happen, and I put this point to you, Francis, as somebody who spends time in courtrooms, that process will be opaque, won't it? We won't see whatever decision the Academy arrive at. We'll find out about the decision. We won't find out much out, I imagine, about how we got there.
I suspect so, and I also suspect that that's right. I mean, just looking at the way that court cases are reported on in America is quite extraordinary and totally unacceptable, in my view. In fact, we were talking about this off camera in relation to another potential story. We have very, very strict rules in this country about how you can report on ongoing court cases, quite rightly. So I'd be very happy to agree that it would not be a good idea to have an appalling sort of saga about some arbitration or if it was an arbitration, it would be in secret anyway, but some sort of proceedings within the Academy. That I agree totally that would be an unnecessary and disproportionate punishment on Will Smith as well. But yes, so it probably is right that it is done in private, but I'm sure that there will be due process, and I'm sure that Will Smith is well able to get the best in the business in LA, however much they may be, to defend him for that.
Francis Hall and Christabel Milbank. Yeah, thanks both very much indeed for your thoughts on that one. Let us know your thoughts and we'll try and share them a little later on. I have to say, Francis, it's very comforting having a legal brief here in the studio. I feel I can tackle any story at all with total legal impunity.
I don't know about that.
Oh dear. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV online and on digital radio. Coming up, Jewish students have reacted with dismay after the National Union of Students elected a new president who has apparently posted anti-Semitic messages previously online. I'll speak to the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. But first, on the day when there's been quite a bit of snow all over the country, we'll bring you the weather forecast.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. There's a small chance of seeing the aurora tonight across parts of northern Britain. A greater chance, though, of seeing a frost. It's going to be a cold one right across the land. High pressure is dominating, but the winds are coming around that high down from the north. That's why it was so chilly out there today. Still a brisk wind blowing across eastern parts in particular, and still plenty of showers coming in from the east as well. So it could well turn icy overnight where we have these showers, which will be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and some snow in places for eastern Scotland, northeast England and at times for East Anglia and parts of Kent also. For the west, many places just dry and clear. Temperatures, though, will be dropping down close to freezing, certainly well below in rural spots. Wales, Northern Ireland, maybe down to -4, -5. Where there's snow lying on the ground, maybe as low as -7 or 8 across Scotland. So a frosty start. We will see more wet weather coming into the northwest, bringing some snow to the hills. Still some showers across the east, so certainly could be icy for the morning rush hour. Temperatures will tick up through the day, though, and we'll keep some showers coming into northeastern parts of England and East Kent. But otherwise, a lot of dry, bright weather with some sunshine. A touch milder than today, still below average, still feeling pretty chilly, but the winds perhaps not quite as strong as they have been today either. We'll see a bit more wet weather coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland during the evening. That'll have some snow over the hills, and it will still have some snow mixed in as it heads southwards across Wales during the early hours of Saturday morning. That'll bring a showery start to the weekend across South Wales, southwest England, with some snow over the mountains and the moors. Still 1 or 2 scattered showers across the east, but otherwise a lot of dry, bright weather across the country this weekend. It's going to stay on the chilly side, yes. There will still be a few showers here and there, but many places will see some sunny spells. But do watch out for some icy conditions overnight tonight.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're on the money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, we're going to remind you about the P&O story, which we've been following closely for a week and more. And a P&O ferry worker has exclusively told GB News about the day he was sacked on the spot while still on board a ship in Rotterdam. He claims staff were ordered back to the UK on coaches, no food, water, or even a ticket home. Our reporter, Ellie Costello, has the story, and we've kept the whistleblower's identity secret for legal reasons.
For staff on board the Spirit of France ferry, which was docked in Rotterdam, they were sacked via a written statement. They were told to get off the ferry and return back to the UK immediately. Many of the sacked employees had lived and worked on the ship for over 20 years. One sacked seafarer, Toby, not his real name, has told me exclusively what that day was like.
The captain said there was going to be a big announcement. He didn't sound quite right on the tannoy. Then the security guards started moving up, coming up the gangway onto the ship. They told everybody to go to the front bar, and all the security guards came along and blocked all the exits. And then some man in a suit read out his statement, and we were all told to pack our stuff, get off the ship as soon as possible, and they'd lead us to our cabins to pack. It's unbelievable. It felt like we'd been invaded by a load of pirates, to be honest with you. And then after that happened, they started bringing the crew on. I think they're all Colombians, and we're still at the front bar. That's the only time it nearly kicked off on our ship, because the crew was reacting bad enough from being sacked. And there you are. And then the agency label was taken upstairs, and our chef went upstairs to check on the staff food, and they were eating all of our staff food. Can you believe it? It's unbelievable. The way they treated us made you feel like you were worthless. You know, we've worked our butts off basically for the last 2 years. And now it's coming to the end like at the end of a tunnel, and you're sacked. And you get repaid by being sacked on the spot and replaced by slave labour. That's what it is. Slave labour.
So why do you think it was done in the way that it was? Why do you think P&O Ferries got security involved?
The security wasn't even there for our safety. It was in case we vandalised the ship, like the French did when they got sacked, because they smashed their ships up big time. But we're not like that. We're English. We're seafarers. On the gangway, we were asked our name and then handed an envelope with our redundancy offer on it. Even if I was offered my job back, I wouldn't take it if Peter Hebblethwaite was still there. The whole system's got to change. They've got to start caring for their workers more.
And what was the journey like back home after that experience? You must have all been so shocked.
We were put onto coaches home from Rotterdam. There was no food or water all day. We had a pregnant woman on our coach who was really stressed. We finally got to the Eurotunnel and there weren't even any tickets booked for us. Eventually, the bus driver paid for all of our tickets on a company credit card, and we all managed to get onto our competitor DFDS's ship, and they put the whole crew in the Premier Lounge where we got free tea and coffee. They treated us better than our own company, really.
We put these allegations to P&O Ferries. In a statement, they did not deny that the sacked seafarers were not given food, water or a ticket to get home. A spokesperson has told us, "We profusely apologise for the difficulties people had during this journey. Due to reasons outside of our control, we weren't able to use the pre-arranged route, and alternative arrangements had to be made at the last minute." In response, Toby says he does not accept P&O's apology, and this statement sums up the way that they had treated their staff. He wishes instead to thank the great British public for all of their support. Ellie Costello, GB News.
The barrister Francis Hoare is alongside me today. And Francis, you made a bit of a name for yourself outside of law, talking about some of the legal implications of what's been happening over the last 2 years during lockdown. You just think the COVID story's gone away. Actually, yesterday we did quite a bit on it, reflecting on the fact that Nicola Sturgeon, who had been seen at Westminster Abbey maskless, then announced in Scotland places of worship would stay masked for some days to come, and shops and public transport until the 18th of April. England this morning, Jenny Harris said, who's the boss of the UK Health Security Agency, said right now there's a bit of a spike in COVID and she would be wearing a mask. I mean, that's just her guidance, isn't it? There's no legal force there, but, you know, it's still part of the national conversation.
Yes, and we have an Omicron variant, which, while incredibly transmissible, obviously apparently 1 in 16 people have it. Although how we know that, I don't know, but obviously we all know lots of people have had it. And we'll also know that it is most similar to a cold. And in that sense, the infection fatality rate based on 21 days after the infections, the number of deaths, the proportion of that is 0.05, and that's according to all the recorded infections. The real infections are probably far more. So that is lower than flu. It's possibly comparable to colds, and people die not just of flu but of colds if they are extremely vulnerable and extremely old. So the question is, and we have every year we have flu, serious flu deaths, and of course we have many colds going around. Every year that happens. There's nothing really to distinguish this virus now, certainly, in its seriousness and severity from those sorts of viruses. And in addition, you can point to any number of newspaper articles in the last 10 years, and probably more, about crisis in the NHS because of flu. Are we really saying that we are going to have masks in public places forever in the winter season?
No.
And one other thing on masks, it seems to me that when you have a scientific analysis, you are trying to discover what the effectiveness will be in totality. Here, we've had 2 years of an experiment around the world, and in any place where masks have been introduced as a mandate, in isolation from anything else, so you can measure their effect in isolation, there has never been a noticeable effect on the increase or the decrease of infections. And that is by far the best evidence, I would have thought, about their efficacy as a mandate, not in a surgical condition, not in surgery, not in a hospital necessarily, but as a mandate in the public place.
We'll tackle this some more in a wee while, but for now, Francis, thanks very much. It's gone 5 o'clock. Coming up this hour, house prices jumping faster than at any time in the last 18 years. When will rising mortgage rates and inflation eventually prick the property market bubble? Or maybe they won't. Also, as a film released by a Disney insider suggests the indoctrination of children is fair game, I'll ask, how do we stop our kids going woke? And Die Hard, Pulp Fiction or Armageddon, as Bruce Willis announces his retirement from acting we rate his greatest films. Alongside me today, the barrister Francis Hoare, but first we've got the headlines with Polly.
Colin, thank you. The latest headlines this hour. The UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russian interests, with the broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. That comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher action against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky received standing ovations as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments. He asked for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership. He also told delegates Russia posed a nuclear threat to the world.
The Russian aggression, what is destroying the lives of people, has become a real threat to your country and to your people as well. They are openly discussing the possibility of using nuclear weapons against those who don't want to subdue.
President Zelensky. Well, Ukraine says many of the Russian forces who had been occupying the Chernobyl nuclear plant have now left. The state nuclear firm says Russian troops had headed for the Belarusian border to regroup, leaving just a few behind. But speaking in Brussels, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said there's no evidence Russia has scaled back.
According to our intelligence, Russian units are not withdrawing, but repositioning. Russia is trying to regroup, resupply, and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region. So we can expect additional offensive actions, bringing even more suffering.
Jens Stoltenberg. In a rare public address, Britain's spy chief has said Vladimir Putin's advisers are simply scared to tell him the truth about the progress of his Ukraine invasion. Speaking in Australia, Sir Jeremy Fleming told the audience the Russian president has massively misjudged the resistance of the Ukrainian people and that he overestimated the capabilities of his military forces to secure victory.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft. And even though we believe Putin's advisers are afraid to tell him the truth, what's going on and the extent of these misjudgments must be crystal clear to the regime.
Germany's Vice-Chancellor has activated emergency plans if Russia halts gas supplies to Europe. It comes after the Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree demanding foreign buyers of gas must pay in rubles from tomorrow. President Putin warned contracts would be halted if payments weren't made. Western countries have rejected the move as a breach of existing contracts, which are set out in euros and in dollars. And a deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas wells has been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The company has welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down wells during an energy crisis. Labour has been launching its local election campaign in Bury in Greater Manchester, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills by up to £600 per household. The party's warning that households could expect more than £2,500 more in bills due to the cost of living crisis. The Labour leader said the public deserves better than what he calls a pathetic response from the government. And firefighters are tackling a large blaze at a business in Stretton in Derbyshire. They say the fire covers an area of 30 metres. Staffordshire police have closed nearby roads and drivers are being advised to avoid the area. No casualties are reported. The Royal Mail is modernising and phasing out traditional first and second class stamps, replacing them instead with newer barcode labels, all part of a modernisation drive said to add security features. Customers will be able to interact online by scanning the new barcodes in the Royal Mail app. Normal stamps will be valid until February next year, after which customers can swap them for the new versions. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. We'll have more from Colin Brazier now.
Coming up on 7 minutes past 5, we're going to tell you about a story that we haven't touched at all this week, but it's an extraordinary murder trial, and it's been taking place this week at Bristol Crown Court. A 52-year-old Turkish national called Can Arslan is charged with murdering a neighbour and attacking others in a feud which started over a parking space. The attack in Wootton, Cardiff, it's a village near Tewkesbury in Gloucestershire, came the day after Arslan told police he would murder neighbour Matthew Borman in a telephone conversation to discuss a complaint. On the 5th of October last year at about 5 p.m, it's alleged Arslan waited for Mr Borman to return from his job at an engineering firm before stabbing him 27 times in the face, the head and the body. He wounded Mr Borman's wife, Sarah, before attacking other neighbours. Well, jurors were shown footage from doorbell cameras and CCTV, which has been released to the media by police. The film shows an off-duty police officer tackling Arslan with a plank of wood as another villager wields a golf club. Mr Borman's eldest child is said to have been left traumatised by the sight of his father's bloodied body lying in the garden. Well, Arslan is said to have been motivated by a desire for revenge at neighbours who had sought his eviction following years of alleged antisocial behaviour that began, as I say, with a row over parking. Arslan is alleged to have made rape and murder threats to his fellow villagers. He made counter-allegations that residents had racially abused him. Arslan has admitted attempted murder, grievous bodily harm with intent and affray, but denies murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The trial at Bristol Crown Court continues, and at its conclusion, if not before, we'll bring you further details of what's unfolding there. Well, let's reflect on another story today, a very different story. Free lateral flow COVID tests for people without symptoms will end tomorrow, the Health Secretary confirmed yesterday, but they could be rolled out again if a new so-called variant of concern emerges, the government has also said. But the days mass testing and ordering boxes and boxes online for nothing sometimes are, it seems, over. The tests, of course, are not really free, and the test and trace programmes have cost the taxpayer hundreds of millions of pounds. The chief executive of the UK Health Security Agency, Dame Jenny Harris, told BBC Radio 4 that high infection rates are not translating into hospital admissions and deaths. She also compared COVID to the flu in what seemed to many like a momentous moment, coming as it did from a health official previously seen as hard line on restrictions. So, is the pandemic over? Let's turn to NHS doctor Veena Babu, who can reflect on where we are with this. And Veena, it's always useful to turn to you as somebody who's on the front line of general practice and seeing what's going on, to things like backlogs, but also just sort of chronicling the ups and downs of how patients are feeling about COVID.
I think it's a very exciting time, and I think patients are getting a bit more confident, if I'm honest with you. They know what to expect. They understand what isolation means. They know who to seek out if they get poorly. They know what numbers to call. They know when to go to hospital. I feel like as a nation, we've become much more well-informed about this, and our confidence has just increased. I think you'll agree with me if I say that, the last 2 years, change has been the only certainty. So even though these tests are now not being offered, if we need to bring it back in, the fact that that fluidity is available, that flexibility, we can bring it back in the future, I think should give people even more confidence that we can reserve these resources for the time being, because like you said, infectivity rates are not translating directly into hospital admissions. So I think that would be a confidence booster again.
Veena, I know we've talked before about what impact psychologically, socially, there's been through lockdown, and lockdown's increasingly disappearing in the rearview mirror, isn't it? But I'm sure for people who have to deal with people who've been cooped up, often people who are vulnerable in different ways, the sorts of people who GPs see day in, day out, you're going to see a lot of pent-up emotions there, aren't you, which are going to take time to unravel and deal with?
Absolutely. Even today, my clinic was full of face-to-faces, and I'm actually excited to see patients again more frequently. I'm excited to get some of that frustration on because everyone needs to vent in some way. And if that is part of us treating them and getting them better, then bring it on. I think even as doctors, we all have, I want to say, a renewed energy to face this head on and to take whatever comes our way. So they might be frustrated, but I think we're ready for it. We're ready to see our patients, treat again, and get back to some level of normality that I think we've all been craving.
And in terms of, we've talked before, Obina, about the to what extent you're seeing people face to face, what you're doing online, and whether actually some GPs, practices, family doctors will just actually retain online appointments as a way of introducing an extra layer of triaging. I know all practices are different in some degree, but what's happening where you are? Is your aspiration to get back to face-to-face consultations and appointments as quickly as possible? How are you doing?
Yeah, so the particular clinic that I work in, it's around East London, and the majority of these clinics, so they still get triage, there are still telephone calls, but there's enough room in each clinic to bring patients in. So say you have a couple of calls in the morning, there might be 7 or 8 slots to bring patients in that afternoon or in the morning. But I also do a pressure clinic where other GPs can just book in face-to-faces. So I had an entire clinic of 15 face-to-face appointments that different people had booked in because they felt that they needed to be seen by a doctor. So that's how the practice I'm working in is addressing things. So depending on which CCG you're part of, how resources are commissioned, each practice may provide their services a bit differently, but we're definitely seeing way more face-to-face appointments. With all the pent-up symptoms and anger. Yeah.
And just on the pent-up symptoms, look, if this is out of court in terms of what you can tell us about confidentially, I'm guessing you are seeing people coming through your doors who, when we talk about pent-up symptoms, these are going to be people who haven't been screened, have missed various diagnostic services, haven't had the scan that might have detected that tumour, really important stuff.
It's funny you say that because even today, I had at least 3 patients who came in for something to do with their ear. But while examining the ear, I had noticed, a skin lesion that actually I had referred urgently to rule out a pathological change to make sure it's not a cancer. But this is something that's been there for a few months, and the patient didn't think that was of concern. But I think that is part of just being a general practitioner, where we pick up symptoms that maybe the patient doesn't think, they might be worried about something else, but in fact, another change is what's important. And I have to be honest, no patient comes in with just one problem, especially after the pandemic. There are lots of things that have built up. So we're also being realistic and trying to address at least 2 or 3 things per consultation to what's realistic. And we're doing our best to, tackle them as they come through.
Veena Babu, we wish you well with your work and appreciate you taking the time to talk to us as well.
Thanks, Colin.
Doctor, thanks very much indeed. Frances Hoare is alongside me, a barrister who has been outspoken when it comes to lockdown in particular and the damaging effects on other areas of life, which, we hope, don't we, that come the great big COVID public inquiry. The impact on places like doctors' surgeries will be factored in, or schools.
Should be, right? Yes, and that was very interesting just then because what Veena was saying shows how important face-to-face appointments are in a GP surgery, because exactly that. You need to see the person to understand it. I'm no GP, but that's effectively what she just said. And that's one issue. The other one is pent-up symptoms because people have been put off, particularly in 2000 and early 2001. 2020 even, and losing 20 years there, 2020 and 2021, particularly then, people were put off by a massive fear campaign from seeing doctors to deal with things that could kill them for fear of something that is very unlikely to in many cases, in most cases. And that's a consequence of the way this country has operated in the COVID era.
Yeah. We'll talk about it some more, I'm sure. Frances, for now, thanks very much indeed. One of Britain's most senior intelligence experts says Vladimir Putin is not being told the truth by his generals. Sir Jeremy Fleming, the boss of GCHQ, the UK's eavesdropping agency, said that Putin's top brass are not giving an accurate picture of how badly things are going on the battlefield. Let's turn to retired British Army officer Major General Tim Cross, regular contributor here. Tim Cross, nice of you to join us again today. Appreciate your time. Can you believe these reports?
Sorry, say again?
I'm just wondering whether you believe that the boss of GCHQ might be correct when he says reports have reached him that Putin is basically working in isolation, not being told the hard truths by his generals.
I'm sure he's right. They'll have been picking up all sorts of communications, intelligence, and so on. I mean, the reality is that any leadership has to recognise that around them will be people who won't tell them the reality of what's going on for all sorts of reasons. But in a regime like Putin's, there's an awful lot of people around him who will be too scared to tell him, the reality of what's going on, including senior military people, because Russia has poured huge amounts of money into their military over the last 20 years or so, and it's been completely revamped. So he will have been led to believe that they are capable of doing what he wants them to do. And the reality is that their strategic leadership, and indeed their operational level leadership, in terms of how they've run this campaign, has simply not fulfilled what they will have been telling him, over the last 5 years or so. So I think most of the generals will be very, very reticent to give him any indication of what is really happening. Now, he presumably is watching, Western media along with Eastern media, must get a feel for it. But I'm sure that our intelligence chief and Americans are saying the same thing. He's being isolated from the reality of what's going on.
Sorry, Tim, I was going to interrupt just to say, we were discussing it here in the studio. This idea, it's almost sort of a demagogue's trope, isn't it? The idea that, Hitler's in his bunker, Stalin's in his bunker, they're being told what they want to hear by their Napoleon, by their senior generals. But actually, that's then. This is now. Even Vladimir Putin's got one of these things. We just moved to pictures, but I'm holding up my smartphone. There you go. He's got one of these.
Yeah, that's true, and that's why I say I would assume he's using it. But the reality is, human nature doesn't change much. I mean, I commanded a battalion, brigade, a division. I had all sorts of people around me, and one of the most difficult things is getting people to tell you what they feel as well as what they think, and telling you the reality of what's going on, not what they think you want to hear. And that applies, in all leadership aspects, whether it's running business, whether it's politicians, or whether it's in the military. Now, I don't want to overplay that, because you're right, Putin should be getting some sort of indication from other things. But I don't think, the reality of human nature, no different from Napoleonic days, through Hitler, and indeed people like Milosevic, Saddam Hussein, and a whole raft of other hoods that I found myself dealing with over the last 30 years.
And when Sir Jeremy makes these comments, I think he made the speech in Australia, he's not really making this. He's not really making the speech to an Australian audience, even less a British audience. He's sort of making it to a Russian audience, isn't he? He's trying to sow seeds of doubt and distrust.
Yeah, he's trying to. I mean, we know, and all of our own media reports, but we know from elsewhere, from GCHQ and others, that a large chunk, a majority, we don't know the percentage, but 60 or 70% of the Russian people get their news from state television. And unlike GBNews or Channel 4 or BBC, the media there is not free to report what is actually happening. It's a state-run system, and it's there to reinforce Putin's message and the overall intent of what he's trying to do. So trying to break into that and give people the reality of what's happening on the ground is what's going on in all sorts of different ways, and I'm sure that was a part of it. But having said that, I don't think we should overplay the ability to influence the thinking within Russia. There are clearly people who are trying to do all sorts of things, including protesters and so on. But the idea that Putin is going to face a major revolt from the people inside Russia, I don't think is a reality, certainly in the short to medium term. The only people who may actually, in the end, kick back against him seriously, and I'm not convinced it will work as a coup, but is the military. Because if he tries to say to the military, I now want you to use gas, I now want to use other weapons of mass destruction, tactical nuclear weapons or whatever, then I think quite a lot of the senior military will then say, hang on a minute, that's a line beyond which we're not prepared to go. The problem will be if they haven't prepared him for the reality of what's happening on the ground, it's going to be quite difficult for them to convince him, not to go down that path. Now, that all said, I do also think we need to be careful to overestimate overestimate what's the failure within the military forces in Russia. There's a lot of capability, a lot of combat capability left to be thrown into this battle. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, and they've said this themselves, but it's something we've chatted about before, Putin has got to be able to go back to the Russian people and say, we have secured the eastern provinces. We have secured the Black Sea, the north coast of the Black Sea. We've linked up to Crimea. We've achieved what we set out to do. And that's undoubtedly where the main effort of their campaign is going to be. And what's going to be interesting is if they manage to get anywhere near achieving that, if they then drive north from the southern provinces and drive south from the north, from Kharkiv and places, then they could well encircle quite a large chunk of the Ukrainian military that have been dug in and have been fighting in those eastern provinces for the best part of 8 years. Now, those have been defensive operations, and to conduct offensive operations, to break out of an encirclement, will be really very, very difficult. So this is not over by any means.
Major General Tim Cross, got to leave it there, but appreciate your expertise as ever. Thanks very much indeed. Francis Hoare is alongside me. We were talking during the commercial break on an allied subject, that if those generals that Tim's talking about decide not to go along with Putin's wishes, if he's removed, the brain drain of people like you, the lawyers, the bankers, the IT executives who have gone to the Gulf and Istanbul, they've left Moscow, they've got out of Russia. It could turn really quickly. A Russia without Putin that is westward facing again would be obviously a very different place, but would attract a lot of Russians who've left, maybe?
It would, but just listening to that from the Major General, it seems to me difficult to see how that's going to actually happen. Because you look at the opinion polls in Russia and the reality of the Russian press and media, and how is certainly the country's not going to turn. If it's the military, goodness knows what could happen in circumstances where there was a coup. Would that be any better for anyone or not? It's not quite a Stauffenberg moment where that probably would have been a good thing.
It probably wouldn't be a clean finish, would it? No. Francis, for now, thanks very much. Coming up, a story that's really been, I think it's fair to say, really neglected, actually. MPs voted yesterday to make abortion pills by post available indefinitely. It amounts to the biggest change in abortion laws since 1967. I'll speak to one MP who opposed that move, which, as I say, didn't receive very much media attention elsewhere. First, we've got the weather for you.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. There's a small chance of seeing the aurora tonight across parts of northern Britain. A greater chance, though, of seeing a frost. It's going to be a cold one right across the land. High pressure is dominating, but the winds are coming around that high down from the north. That's why it was so chilly out there today. Still a brisk wind blowing across eastern parts in particular, and still plenty of showers coming in from the east as well. So it could well turn icy overnight where we have these showers, which will be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and some snow in places for eastern Scotland, northeast England, and at times for East Anglia and parts of Kent also. For the west, many places just dry and clear. Temperatures, though, will be dropping down close to freezing, certainly well below in rural spots. Wales, Northern Ireland, maybe down to -4, -5. Where there's snow lying on the ground, maybe as low as -7 or 8 across Scotland. So a frosty start. We will see more wet weather coming into the northwest, bringing some snow to the hills. Still some showers across the east, so certainly could be icy for the morning rush hour. Temperatures will tick up through the day, though, and we'll keep some showers coming into northeastern parts of England and East Kent. But otherwise, a lot of dry, bright weather with some sunshine. A touch milder than today, still below average, still feeling pretty chilly, but the winds perhaps not quite as strong as they have been today either. We'll see a bit more wet weather coming into Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland during the evening. That'll have some snow over the hills, and we'll still have some snow mixed in as it heads southwards across Wales during the early hours of Saturday morning. That'll bring a showery start to the weekend across South Wales, southwest England, with some snow over the mountains and the moors. Still 1 or 2 scattered showers across the east, but otherwise a lot of dry, bright weather across the country this weekend. It's going to stay on the chilly side. Yes, there will still be a few showers here and there, but many places will see some sunny spells. But do watch out for some icy conditions overnight tonight.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube. You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, one effect of lockdown was that women were struggling to have abortions. Clinics were closed and terminations cancelled. The government came up with a temporary solution. It would suspend the rules that regulate abortion for a brief period. Pregnant women would be allowed to have abortion pills sent to them in the post. Before these DIY abortions, the first of 2 pills had to be taken in a clinic or hospital and within 10 weeks of conception. Suddenly, there was no meaningful medical supervision. That has caused problems. In November, a study calculated that 10,000 women underwent hospital treatment after DIY abortions. In May 2020, police investigated the death of an unborn baby after its mother took a DIY home abortion pill while 28 weeks pregnant. But yesterday, this temporary emergency measure became permanent in England, and it did so thanks to the votes of Conservative MPs. A free vote in the House of Commons agreed to make pills by post available indefinitely by 215 votes to 188. This amounts to the biggest change in abortion laws since 1967, and hardly anyone noticed that it had happened. Well, joining me to discuss this, the Democratic Unionist Party MP, Carla Lockhart, who represents Upper Bann. Carla Lockhart, appreciate your time. That vote, I mean, it's a fairly clear majority for a substantial change in the law. What did you make of it?
Well, it's a very disappointing result for those of us who were lobbying against the change. The government a number of weeks ago had indicated that they wanted to cease with the temporary provision, as was the case with all other temporary provisions that were introduced for reasons of COVID. They had wanted to cease it in August and allow 6 months for providers to reintroduce pre-pandemic procedures. Unfortunately, the Lords, Baroness Sugg, brought forward an amendment to the Health and Social Care Bill. The way in which that was done was absolutely inappropriate in terms of how to make law. It was debated in the Lords at 1 o'clock in the morning. Most Lords were not present, and it was passed 75 votes to 35. It then came to the Commons, as it does in a ping-pong session, and it came to the Commons yesterday. Baroness Sugg's amendment sought to ensure that this was made law, that it continued, that pills by post would continue. Unfortunately, we lost the vote. The government had indicated that they were not supporting Baroness Sugg's amendment, but because it's a conscience issue, they did not whip their members on it. As a result, we lost it by 27 votes. really disappointing for those of us who are pro-life and those of us who value both lives, both the women and the babies, in all of these scenarios.
Carla Lockhart, I mean, you obviously, you don't like it, but these were the elected representatives of the country concerned. As you say, it was a vote of conscience. They voted with their conscience.
But if you look at the number of abstentions on this and the way in which this piece of legislation was brought forward, I don't believe it's a good way in making law. There has been no scrutiny of this provision, and there has been no public consultation whenever it was introduced. We are now seeing the consequences of this piece of legislation. 1 in 17 women are having to seek hospital assistance because of complications. I recounted a case yesterday that was being reported in the media of a young girl, Savannah, aged 16. She made the phone call. The abortion provider said that they calculated her at 8 weeks. She took the pills. She had to be hospitalised. She was between 20 and 21 weeks pregnant. That baby was born with a heartbeat. Now, that is wholly inappropriate, and it's not what the abortion pills was ever intended to do. So we're calling on the government, and we will be looking at ways and means of trying to ensure that this is brought back to the Commons and gets proper scrutiny.
Carla Lockhart, there we have to leave it. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. We'll talk to Frances Hoare, who's a barrister. I'm sure has got a perspective on this very shortly. But in the meantime, we're going to take you to the news bulletin right now with Polly.
Colin, thank you. The headlines: the UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russians, with the broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. It comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher action against Moscow. Volodymyr Zelensky receiving a standing ovation as he addressed the Belgian, Dutch and Australian parliaments, asking for further sanctions, weapons and help in obtaining EU membership from delegates. He also told them Russia poses a nuclear threat to the world. Vladimir Putin has signed a decree which demands foreign buyers of Russian gas must pay in rubles from tomorrow. He's warned that contracts would be halted if payments weren't made, but Western countries have rejected the move as a breach of existing contracts, which are set out in euros and dollars. Ukraine says many of Russia's forces occupying the Chernobyl nuclear plant have left and are now heading towards the Belarusian border, leaving just a few on the ground in the exclusion zone. It also says Russian troops have retreated from a nearby town where Ukrainians who worked at the Chernobyl plant live. And here, a deadline to cap the UK's only shale gas wells has been extended, with regulators telling fracking firm Quadrilla it now has until the end of June next year. The decision comes ahead of the government's delayed energy strategy. The company has welcomed the move, saying it would have been absurd to pour concrete down wells during an energy crisis. And Labour has launched its local election campaign in Greater Manchester. Sir Keir Starmer has pledged to cut energy bills for households by £600, warning that everyone can be expected to pay more than £2,500 more due to the cost of living crisis. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. More from Brazier after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Another story that probably deserved a bit more attention here than it's had. Leaked video from an internal meeting of Disney executives has sparked a row in America about the willingness of big media companies to indoctrinate children with what you could describe, I suppose, as woke values. The video shows senior figures at Disney discussing programming for children and their determination to pursue an on-screen, quote, gay agenda. This week, Disney's boss publicly said the firm was aiming to dramatically increase the amount of diversity on its shows. The Disney disclosures have prompted one conservative media company, the Daily Wire, to launch its own children's programming and us to ask this question. If you're inclined, how do you stop your children from going woke? Joining me is Peter Whittle, founder and director of the New Culture Forum think tank, who has given this some thought, Peter.
Yes.
And what conclusions?
Well, what's interesting about this really, Colin, is that Disney have been going woke for a while, right? So we've had trigger warnings on their films, and I think that in the theme parks, for example, it's no longer welcome boys and girls. It's all, that's all going. But what is interesting about this is that, and it's why it's called such a storm, is that these were leaked, as you said, internal meetings where they were going all out, right? We want 50% LGBTQ and minorities in all productions, which is, of course, massively disproportionate anyway. But I think the overriding thing is these huge companies, you can't get bigger than Disney, are pushing these kind of agendas, whether it's, Black Lives Matter or critical race theory. In this case, it's about gender theory, critical theory. And of course, there comes a point where you either continuously complain about it, or you maybe go off and try and do something different, which is what the Daily Wire's done.
I was going to say, where's the role for the market in this? Because you'd have to say, if people don't like what they're buying, they don't have to buy it, they can buy something else instead. But there has to be an alternative, and it's got to be decent.
Well, exactly. This is the point. This is crucial. I mean, the point as well is that obviously here we've got GB News, which is an alternative, but it's a news channel, news and comment channel. I would say a lot of the insidious kind of indoctrination that goes on, particularly on places like the BBC, happens in its drama, in its comedy programmes, in things that are not news. So
it's Doctor Who.
Well, exactly. All of that. And there are various adaptations of classics and all of those. And I think that if you start to produce something that doesn't have that as its focus, then I think that there will be a market for it. Because, frankly, Hollywood in general, of which Disney is a part, of course, has been going woke for a very long time. It's got a particular agenda. And, basically there is this saying, go woke, go broke. And we've seen this, for example, with the Oscars. I mean, the Oscars have been hugely in the news this week. It's about the first time for years that they have, simply because the audiences have been going down and down. People have got tired of being preached at, either explicitly, like in an awards ceremony, or implicitly in Disney films.
Francis, obviously as an employment lawyer, as one of your areas of expertise. I'm not going to ask you to comment directly on, anything that reflects what you've dealt with. But just as somebody who sees the way big companies work, I'll address this point that I'm going to put to Peter about the democratic deficit in all this, because it seems to me, Peter, you've got a big company like Disney, force Disney, read any other number of companies, and they impose an ideology that a group of people, highly networked, highly credentialed people in a room, highly paid people in a room, decide is what that company should be doing. They never put it to the test democratically. They don't ask the parking attendants, the people selling the ice creams at Disneyland, whatever it is, because they know if they put it to a vote, they might not necessarily get the answer they want.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if I can just say, with that, perfect, I would say, the perfect answer to that is to stop buying the thing. Whether it's Ben & Jerry's ice cream or whether it is, Disney, stop going. They will then understand it. They understand the bottom line. That people have that power if only they knew it.
But it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I know, the Disney Channel. I got pestered for the Disney Channel so the kids could watch the Disney Channel. Guys, it's going. I'm going to save some money and I'm going to save you from being indoctrinated. That will be a fight. Francis, I mean, that's a fight for parents. And my introduction here was, how do you stop your kids going woke? It's really hard, right?
Just going back to that employment point, of course, at the moment, we've got the forced starter trial going on, and that's the case of Maya Forced Starter, who was dismissed essentially from her charity because she had said what are called gender-critical points about biological males and the trans rights and so on. And that was found to be a philosophical belief that's protected by the Equality Act. And now there's an ongoing trial about what happens about that, whether her dismissal was unlawful and so on. But that case and that decision by Mr. Justice Chowdhury, as it happens, was a very important free speech win. And there've been others recently in the courts, and that at least is encouraging.
Riddle me this, Francis, and Peter, share your thoughts on it as well. If they get to the bottom of the Disney leaker, if Disney identifies who it was who's leaked this video of them agonising about how they're going to make their agenda more diverse, etc., slightly embarrassing for the company, but I think of public interest in America. But they might, I just wonder how that one would go, whether that employee is in trouble or they can play the whistleblower card seriously.
I think they'd be in great trouble, actually. I mean, from what I can understand, it's not that easy to be a conservative or someone perceived to be a conservative working at places like Disney anyway. I mean, I think where the penny's dropping now, this is not just a public sector thing. This is not just something that we talk about with the NHS, say, for example. This is in corporate life. This is in corporate America, corporate Britain too.
Peter, for now, thanks very much.
Thank you
for coming in. Lovely waistcoat, by the way. We're enjoying this. It's quite chilly in here. Now, a teacher at a leading British grammar school has been reportedly suspended after allegedly using a mug with an image depicting the Prophet Muhammad. The staff member at Colchester Royal Grammar School in Essex was reportedly photographed with the item, which had a cartoon from an online comic, Jesus and Mo, on it. A spokesperson for the school said, "We've been notified that an image has been shared online of an individual appearing to use a cup that has an offensive image on it. At this time, we are looking into the matter. While we cannot comment on individuals, this will be reviewed in line with our policies and procedures and the appropriate robust action taken as necessary. The staff member concerned is currently away from the school." Let's turn to Brendan O'Neill, the chief political writer at the online magazine Spiked, I should say. Brendan, welcome to you. Robust action. What do you think?
I hope not. I hope there should be no action at all in a case like this. This is supposed to be a secular democracy. We don't live in a theocracy, thank God, no pun intended. And therefore, people should not be punished for displaying an image of any religious figure, including Muhammad. And I'm very worried, especially coming a year after the Batley grammar scandal, where a teacher is still in hiding for the supposed crime of showing an image of Muhammad to his pupils in a discussion on freedom of speech and blasphemy. The idea that teachers can be punished in this way for supposedly blaspheming against Islam, that should worry everyone who believes in secular democracy and in freedom of speech.
Brendan, I was going to ask you, whether we don't know the individual circumstances here, I was going to ask you about whether maybe this was a deliberate attempt, a stunt on the part of the teacher concerned to become a sort of free speech martyr. And then I checked myself and thought, well, hang on, what's that got to do with anything? I mean, it is what it is on one level, and whatever his or her motivation was, it's somebody with a mug with an image on it, and that raises questions about what action the school's going to take, but also, as we saw with the example you referred to from a year ago, what role the local education authority takes, and of course the teaching unions in all this.
Exactly, that's right. And the most shocking thing about the Batley grammar scandal was not so much the protesters themselves. There were a bunch of kind of Islamist protesters outside the school kicking up a fuss. That's what those kinds of protesters do. That's what you expect them to do. They are religious fundamentalists. They go from protest to protest. They want to protect their religion from criticism and offense. That's what they do. But what was more shocking was the failure of the institutions of liberal society to protect that teacher in Batley Grammar. So the teaching unions, for example, the school itself initially suspended the teacher and allowed people to demonize him, essentially. The political class and the commentariat didn't do a good job of defending him either. So it was the failure of those liberal institutions that was most disturbing. And I fear that something similar is happening in this case of the Jesus and Mo mug, which is that it looks like the school is not going to defend the teacher. So far, it doesn't seem to be willing to do so. And it remains to be seen if other people in teaching unions and amongst politicians in general will defend him. So it's the failure of our society to recognize the importance of freedom of speech, which I think often gives a green light to religious fundamentalists who want to clamp down on discussion about Islam.
Brendan, it may be a failure, as you put it, but I suppose on one level, it's a human failure. It's a comprehensible failure in the sense that I admire your moral courage in taking the stand you've done on this. I'm far too much of a coward to say a fraction of what you say. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, isn't it? That people are afraid.
Yeah, there is a culture of fear around this, and it's quite understandable. There has been violence, there has been Islamist violence in recent years, particularly in France, where the Charlie Hebdo massacre was carried out against cartoonists and journalists. Samuel Paty, the school teacher in France, was beheaded in public for showing an image of Muhammad to his school kids. So it's a very serious issue, and people are sometimes understandably unwilling to take risks. But I think unless we have the courage as a society, then we're never going to get over this problem. And we can't give in to the heckler's veto or the extremists' veto, where we organize society and public discussion according to the tastes and the sentiments of the most extreme people who live in society, in this case, Islamist fundamentalists. We have to organize society according to our principles. And the key principle, in my view, should be freedom of speech for everyone on every issue.
Brendan O'Neill, as ever, thanks very much indeed for your time. Thanks a lot. Francis Hoare is alongside me, a barrister. Have we got a new de facto blasphemy law in this country?
Well, no, but situations like this in the Batley Grammar School, because remember that the offence here is not that there was an offensive image, it's that there was an image at all. And I can actually say, controversially perhaps, that there is an image of the Prophet in my Inn of Court. Now, what's going to happen? Is that going to have to be covered up? Because again, not an offensive image, lauding the Prophet Muhammad as a lawmaker in the 19th century, but in a Christian society that didn't well, not disrespectfully, but didn't think about the effect that might have. Is that kind of thing going to be prevented? There's another case in the US, I think, Supreme Court, or one of the major institutions in the United States, that has again a statue lauding the Prophet Muhammad as a great lawmaker, and again there's serious controversy about that. These are not offensive portrayals. Okay, in certainly no more offensive against Muhammad than against Jesus. Of course, a prophet in Islam as well as in Christianity, I suppose. So I suppose that cuts both ways. But still, that's the offence. It is disobeying a rule of Islam. And that is exactly what blasphemy laws are all about. So one can well understand that it would be inappropriate for a teacher to be offensive about any religion to his students. That is understandable. But simply portraying, and I suppose it could be said that he was stirring controversy by holding a mug with a picture, knowing presumably that was offensive. But on the other hand, you could say that he was testing whether or not there was a blasphemy.
But, Francis, this is where we come back to my old friend, your old friend, process.
Indeed.
We'll ponder on that later, perhaps. Now, if you were expecting a jump in mortgage rates or inflation to take the steam out of the housing market, think again. Far from flattening the housing market, is roaring ahead. The annual growth in prices hit 14.3% this month, up from 12.6% in February. That amounts to the most rapid rise in prices in some 18 years. This is according to figures published by the Nationwide Building Society. Let's turn to the founder and editor of moneymagpie.com, Jasmine Birtles. Hi to you, Jasmine. This is a big jump.
It is, absolutely. And as you say, it's quite extraordinary, really, because house prices seem to be defying gravity. You would expect, as you say, that a bit of a rise, admittedly not very much, in the last few weeks would have put house buyers off. But no, I do think, though, that at some point in the next few months, prices will slow down. They're going to have to, because we are going to see increases in base rate, which will mean that at least those on variable rates or tracker rates will find that they're paying more for their mortgages, and new buyers will find that their mortgages are going to be more expensive. There'll be fewer of the really cheap ones. But also, I think, as the cost of living bites, as inflation goes up, we're going to have less money to play with generally, and that those affordability criteria that mortgage companies are supposed to use will mean, I think, that more people gradually will be rejected.
Jasmine, is part of the problem, not the problem, part of the of what we're seeing here is that the volume of transactions is I'm guessing fairly low, because we hear stories, don't we, about estate agents just not having enough houses to flog, and is that skewing the market a little bit just because the volumes are quite small?
Yes, good point. Yes, I mean, the thing about house prices is it's very patchy, and taking an overall average, it doesn't really show you what's happening in your area. So, for example, in central London, there are quite a lot of properties there, although quite a few people are taking them off and renting them because they're not getting the prices that they were hoping for. But out in the countryside, in the suburbs, by the sea, which has been very, very popular over the last couple of years, prices have gone up. It's now very difficult to find particularly family homes. And as you say, in those areas, estate agents are really struggling to find the properties. So, yeah, it's supply and demand, as you say. In those areas, it's supply and demand. A lot of people can't get the properties they want. So there's a big fight to get the ones that actually exist.
Jasmine Birtles, really good to talk to you. Thanks for your time.
Right.
Thanks a lot. Francis, what final thoughts on the housing market? Still highly paid QCs and barristers still throwing the cash at the property market?
Yeah, supply and demand, and it's actually pretty terrifying. We've got runaway inflation and very low interest rates, and goodness knows. I mean, we remember we remember the 1990s, and it was absolutely horrendous what happened then. And query, did it have to happen? But certainly, raising interest rates then did curb inflation, and having been printing money since 2008, not helped, of course, by the last 2 years' economic catastrophe that was, in my view, not totally, but very largely brought upon itself by the government and other world governments. Goodness knows what the next few years will bring.
Francis, really good to have you in the studio today. Really appreciate your time. I know you were reluctant to get involved in my Bruce Willis poll on account of not having seen enough Bruce Willis.
I think 12 monkeys for me.
OK, yeah. It's not in our poll. I do apologise. Right. But to those of you who have taken part, Bruce Willis yesterday, around about this time, announcing that he was retiring from acting at the age of 67. Aphasia is his problem. We asked you what your favourite film was, and there is no doubt. If you can't see it, if you're on radio, Die Hard wins hands down, getting on for 57% of you. Jubes & Co. is next. Do stand by.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. There's a small chance of seeing the aurora tonight across parts of northern Britain. A greater chance, though, of seeing a frost. It's going to be a cold one right across the land. High pressure is dominating, but the winds are coming round that high down from the north. That's why it was so chilly out there today. Still a brisk wind blowing across eastern parts in particular, and still plenty of showers coming in from the east as well. So it could well turn icy overnight where we have these showers, which will be a mixture of rain, sleet, hail and some snow in places for eastern Scotland, northeast England and at times for East Anglia and parts of Kent also.